Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to Sin's Workshop. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. So, today we are going to be reviewing Game Changer and Heated Rivalry. And you're all probably thinking, Cynthia, these are not books you would normally read. And no, they are not. If I have not seen Heated Rivalry, maybe I will further down the line. I hear it's a really good show, it's just not, well, one, I have kids, so when do I ever get to watch what I want to watch? I still haven't finished watching Andor, okay? Right now we're rewatching Cardcaptor Sakura, so mom life. I don't really get to watch what I want to watch, but even if this were a choice, I'd probably only tune in to just see what all the hype is about. It's not something that I normally gravitate towards. I watch things like The Witcher and Stranger Things and Sailor Moon, Cardcaptor Sakura. I don't really watch a lot of TV anymore, to be honest. Castle. We're watching Castle with my husband. Ooh, Grimm. Grimm's a really good one. I love Grimm. Boston Legal, Monk, Psych. Just a little taste of the genre that I do watch. I still haven't even watched Bridgerton, although I kind of really want to now, just because I see all the clips. I'm like, you know what? I think maybe I will like this, I don't gravitate towards shows where it's heavy romance. That's just not me. It's just not something I go out looking for, right? If I tune in, it's mostly because I want to see, like, okay, what is all the hype about? But, because I have such limited time to myself, I kind of try to prioritize the shows that I know I want to watch. So, again, I know I went on a little tangent there, and I apologize for that. Sorry. These are not books I would normally read, ever, because they're so heavy on the romance. However, my bestie brother from another mother, this was his inaugural book club pick for his new book club. So I'm, of course, going to support him. Obviously. Like, there was no question about that. I got the audiobooks. Probably thinking, the audiobooks, why would you do that? No, the audiobooks were not the greatest, but they did not make me hate the books. In fact, I quite liked the books. This is one of those moments I'm like, wow, I'm really glad I stepped out of my comfort zone. I will say, I liked Game Changer more than Heated Rivalry. A couple just different reasons. Game Changer, I think, just has a more emotional story with Scott and Kip. I think that it's a little bit more realistic as well. And I enjoyed the emotion. I was a little thrown that by chapter 3 they're already like hooking up, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's the type of book that this is gonna be. Like, oh, okay. As someone who's bi, that's, my experience as a queer person usually gets kind of, especially because I'm a girl, I'm like, oh, it's just a phase kind of situation. And because I'm married a man, it's like, oh no, you're not really bi. Your experience, like, no, that's not how that goes. So my experience as a queer person is definitely going to be different from someone who is gay, right? Like, it's going to be a completely different experience. And when I was reading the book, I felt like it was a different experience, but I felt like it was a quite eye-opening experience as well. And knowing people who are queer and who are gay, who have gone through similar aspects of this and have spoken to me about this way before this book even came into my purview, I had an understanding of, like, okay, that's why this is realistic to me. So I think it was a more emotional story for me to read. However, that being said, I think the pacing with Heated Rivalry was a little better because it was very fast. It was a very fast-paced story. But these guys were just fucking, like, every chapter. And I think, to me, their relationship made very little sense in the beginning, but only part way, because, you know, you could see that these are two people, especially with, holy shit, why am I, Hudson? Is that his name? Why am I blanking on his name? You guys know who I'm talking about. I feel like they were just punishing themselves by being together. Like, they were hating on their queerness so much that it's like, okay, I'm going to be with you to punish myself. And like that part I totally understood, and I totally thought like, yeah, I've been there, I've done that, you know, been with someone just to punish myself because you think you're not deserving of something real, and you're so like afraid of being your real self and ashamed of being your real self that you just let yourself be in this toxic abusive relationship, right? Been there, done that. You know, I think that's something that any person, queer or not, can relate to. So I thought that aspect of the story was not relatable, but you could understand that. But their whole relationship just didn't have the emotional impact that Scott and Kip's had. I mean, look at that. You know, not Heated Rivalry, their names just like escape me, but Game Changer, like, I'm all there for it. I think that there were more memorable moments in Game Changer because Game Changer really focused on these two individuals and their relationship and, you know, the emotion behind it. Whereas the other one was kind of just like a whole lot of smut and sex and like, It lacked a level of depth from me, which is why I tend to not read those types of books. And I was fully prepared for that to happen when in the first book, they're just like going at it, and book 3 like, oh, okay, that's type of book we're getting. And then I ended up being really pleasantly surprised by the emotional impact of the story and just everything Scott goes through, and then just the dynamic between him and Kip. You know, Kip really saying like, I don't want to push you, but I don't want to be in the closet, and I don't want to feel like dating you is making me feel ashamed of who I am. And I think that that's exactly the push that Scott kind of needed. And, you know, Scott just being like, oh, I'll pay for you, kind of, you know, just made Kip feel like a whore. It's like, well, you're not really open with your relationship with me, and now you want to pay for all my stuff. It's like, that's not the kind of relationship I want. Like, he wants an equal relationship, right? He doesn't want Scott to just have all the power, which I think is really important. You know, there was a lot of character growth in Game Changer. There's a lot of depth to it. So I really, really enjoyed Game Changer a whole lot because it wasn't just about the sex. You know, the sex was there, but that was not the main focus of the story. Whereas with Heated Rivalry, I felt like that was more of the same story. And you can see that these two books are two very, very different books set within like the same world. And I do mention other characters in the other books, which I thought was really, really interesting, really, really clever, because you get to see how these two worlds and these two books are intertwined, right? I just think Game Changer was a stronger story, and Heated Rivalry was just like a 3-star read for me. Game Changer, definitely a 4-star read for me. Like I said, there's a reason I don't, you know, some people like smut just because it's just smut, you know? It's like a nice palate cleanser, I guess. It's just like something you don't really need to think about. It's just there for entertainment, right? I like books with more, because that's just how my brain operates. When I want to like not think, I just play video games, honestly. But I think this is a perfect example of how some books with smut can have a thoughtful storytelling in them. You know, some books that are smut, you know, are just like just smut with no story, right? I think we can all admit that. But then you have some books like Game Changer and Heated Rivalry that, you know, especially Heated Rivalry, it's mostly just smut, but there is an actual story behind it with these two characters. You know, there is some depth to it. I just wish there had been more, because I don't need that much smut in my life. I don't. But Game Changer, yeah, it had those sexy, spicy scenes in it, but it was more focused on that character. It was more focused on their growth and their relationship and the emotion behind them and the struggles that they have, you know, coming out as gay in their communities. So I think Game Changer is a better story with some smut in it, and I think Heated Rivalry is mostly just smut. It actually does have an underlying emotional story to it that just kind of gets like washed away, though. You know, it does get washed away and subdued by the smut. You know, don't really register it a whole lot, you know. But by the end of the book, once their relationship stops being so like, I'm with you to punish myself, and they finally realize like, oh no, I love you and I want to have I want a life with you, then it becomes, you know, a little bit more balanced and a little bit more emotional for like that last 75% of the book, which I think is a decent amount. You know, not 75, 25, last 25% of the book. 75% of it's mostly just smut. But yeah, they were really good books. I am glad that I pushed myself to read them, to support my bestie, because these were not books that I was really interested in reading at all, just because I don't gravitate towards romance really, and I don't really gravitate towards that much smut in my life. So yeah, but I'm glad I pushed myself out of my comfort zone. I'm glad my bestie pushed me out of my comfort zone as well by picking these two books. And honestly, I really do think they are worth the read. Am I going to continue the rest of the series? Probably not, just because there are a whole ton of other books on my TBR shelf that I want to read much more. But, you know, maybe down the line I'll get around to reading them. We'll see. They were good books. I understand the hype, and I do think that the hype is deserved, especially for Game Changer. And I think everyone needs to start with Game Changer first and foremost. It is really, really emotional. And such a well-written book with really good, compelling characters, honestly. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So, Game Changer, solid 4 stars. Heated Rivalry, 3, soft 3.5 stars, honestly. It was good. It was just... smut's not something I go looking for, as I've said. My besties read smut, which is great for them, but we're allowed to have different tastes. It's okay. This is a safe space. We listen and we don't judge. On that note, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with all your book friends. And on that note, happy reading.